Chilly here with siriustalesmoon. This is Mercury, our Jupiter day. Midheaven is conjoining Antares, and there is a sense of humor to the message today. Um, Jupiter is 22 in Cancer, squaring Chiron in Aries, and Mercury is toxic 18 degrees in Sagittarius. And what's better for a toxic degree than to clean something that could have become toxic? And so I did that today. Um, and then what prompted me to press record was the conglomerate thinking of which type of house can a person live. Okay, and I'm one of the people in the world that's dealing with that. And then it extended to, first of all, this extended to the fact that if right now I'm living at basically my parents and one of my parents, and the normal thing that people say to their children when they're children is, when you have a home, you do that in your house. And when it comes to, let's say, people that need to stay, whether they're refugees or in some crisis situation, or entrepreneurs, okay, with like, um, and every house has its own habits and costumes and so on. But it extends to refugees and immigrants, where people say, oh, that you do in your country. Or, but here is the thing, people need to have a house and people need to have a country. And so the way I see this Jupiter in Cancer squaring Chiron, both on the 22, which is war, is that the war on resources is basically about acquiring land. But this land doesn't come without people, cultures, beliefs, costumes, and housing. And so let's say a country is invested in the oil of another country. Then the people that need to flee their homes, basically they need to go somewhere as refugees. Where do they go? The country that's invested basically in their oil. They're digging oil in Israel and Palestine. It's bordering Jordan. So get, get prepared. Um, and so what happens is that now a part of the costumes and cultures are fantastic. You know, it's like when I was in high school, we had student exchange, and you send someone to Eckville, and then the children come back home, and so they come back home with funny costumes. Okay, it's um, I try to think about when I was in between houses and I had, funny costumes that and it usually goes in about a particular way, because a person, let's say, if you're in a foreign country, then you're more exposed to both their good things and their funny things. And then you come back home, and now you're carrying these these timestamps of the good things and the funny things. Where when it comes to housing, then when we're children, our parents are like, oh, that you do in your house. When you have a house, you do that type of stuff. And that type of stuff can be as simple as, I don't know, cooking in your bedroom. I'm an aromatherapist. My mom can't stand the texture of oil. Okay, the carrier oils. So, so I have to separate the things, and basically it calls me to create my own little place where I can um, do basically what I do, the butters or creams and stuff, and it's all oily. Okay, I had a good friend who couldn't stand the scent of essential oils to begin with, and all of those type of things that are healing necessitate a different house. Okay, I was like, oh, this person is coming around. What if I think about different cultures? One of the healthiest types of breads is injera. Now, when the Ethiopians would let the injera, they have a process that they do, like with the sourdough, except that it has a scent. And some people, I love that scent, so I had no problem. The people that didn't had a problem. And then people could think like, oh, people are racist. They don't want it. It was like nothing to do with that. They're just sensitive to the smell. Now, it's one of the tastiest breads and healthiest breads that one can eat. Um, it's like a sourdough, but it's done with a particular type of I don't know how how to make it, um, but that's just one of the things that we are dealing with in wartime, and the natural things, when it's immigrants or something like that. A lot of people say, yeah, go back to your country, do that in your country. Now, even if the people go back to their country, it's not, they're not the same people, and the country is not the same country. In both my motherland and fatherland, and I used to call Netherlands my fatherland, but my mom is actually way more way more Dutch, um, way more Dutch than I thought, and so my motherland and my motherland, both of them were having attacks on housing and exploding housing or houses set on fire. So this is a really physical type of the country. Is not the same country. Um, but it's also the notion that people are not meant to live in big complexes that that are supposed to be housing solution for when they harvest oil in one place and everybody has to live in another place, except for the people that are invested in the harvesting of the oil. And and even those people, I mean, I remember when it was the before the subprime, one could live on the interest. So the rent was more expensive than to travel, particularly in Europe. And so we slept in the car. For people to sleep in the car, it's not that expensive. And I remember one night, if we're stopping at Monaco, it was on the way. Hmm. Okay. Sometimes we would park in parkings of where the houses are because because it's on the way. um, and a lot of people that travel in those particular ways, they know that. This is why Americans didn't get excited when they lost their houses. They got excited when they lost their RVs. Because as far as my family goes, if it was safe to live in a tent, then then it's like, if it's like if that thing is houseable and you make that your home. So that's definitely one of the things that I learned when I was in Netherlands, because we were always thinking we'd live here or we'd live there. And then when it came to the rentals, it's kind of like, well, will we stay another year? Would be, and when I was homeless in Netherlands, then it was this shelter that became one prison cell. It was better that I slept better than in the hostel, because in the hostel I didn't have my own room. It was fantastic hostel, but I didn't have my own room and everybody was snoring. And so I began. So one lady brought me incense that to burn, a frankincense incense to burn, and I had this keychain that I made little altar for a home, and that's basically. And then I found blankets. I don't even remember where did I find them. And so I began to make that place a home, which only now I think about it was how I lost the art of making a place a home, as well um, as well as the notion where there are gonna be new homes and there are gonna be new countries, because we're gonna need them. We're gonna see that it's the people that, to the people, you know what? And if you're this person, I see that with Britain a lot. My mother was hearing the song, You Know Where You Can Show Your Palestine. And for several months, every time she heard that, I tried to put off the recording and so on, because I was like really ashamed that my mother is hearing a Nazi song. So, and then she told me to look at the lyrics, and she said that's a British person saying, "Wait a second, our British flag become almost terrorist, but people wave their Palestinian flags." And basically, he was complaining. It's not that he loves Israel, it's just that he hates something that takes over his home and has different costumes, different, okay, um, different everything. And so much so that he comes to sing, You Know Where You Can Show Your Palestine. But these type of things, that would not happen without British Petroleum Company. So I really invite people to check, are they invested in oil? While their investment is probably the reason that they can clothe their children and educate their lineage, a degree in Cambridge or in Oxford is not something that just, and even the people that live on the grants are usually trafficked. Um, so if basically one is invested in oil, then they need to just, let's see, it's important to understand where do they drill the oil. Those people are going to be their neighbors. And not only that, it's not that the people that are, the homeless of the place are going to be the neighbors. It's the people that had the money to to move away that are going to be their neighbors, which means that they have pride in those costumes. That the costumes that a person calls primitive, those people had the money to move because of, and each and every costume that got you away from war is something that you're afraid to let go of as well. Now, if they need to take it back to their country, well, and let's face it, the fact that they had the money to move, either they were invested in oil, or they just found the money for the flight ticket. But during war, it's kind of difficult to fly. When I flew to Amsterdam around Christmas, it was the pandemic times, which is how I could afford a flight. Now, as a holistic health practitioner, the costumes that would keep a person healthy or their nervous system safe would be causing disturbance to that which permeates their space. This is why people snore more when they're homeless. When I found a home, the, the, the neighbors, before the neighbor got pregnant, she had a dog, and the dog was snoring. And I just saw the dog, and the dog was so endearing. I would wake up from the dog snoring in the middle of the night, but I would wake up with an endearing feeling. When people are homeless and in crisis and feel that they didn't have a place, whether it's in their home countries or, okay, um, particularly, if I think about Netherlands, I was like, wait a second, people don't really have health system. And I'm a holistic health practitioner. There's a lot of value that I can bring, which would necessitate life costumes and change of the entire structure of the country and the people so that they will be healthy. But I wasn't going there to be a burden. I was strictly thinking that I was going there to live there, basically. And then when the people, like in the municipality, ask, okay, do you see yourself? Are you planning to stay in Netherlands? And I'm like, if I'm well treated. And it sounds like an investment person that's looking for a tax haven, but I was not. I was not doing that. I was basically thinking, wait a second, I need to be treated well. I need to have my freedom. I need to have my safety. I wasn't the house that I had to flee wasn't that I was fleeing a mansion. I was fleeing my student one room apartment, and I was not taking every apartment immediately because I needed to get to the root cause of what's happening. And thinking, okay, anyway, if I'm an aromatherapist, then or consultation or whatnot, maybe I would need to meet people one on one in a separate room. And I'm like, okay. But here we have Googleplex people dealing with these problems, and they're gonna need new houses, and they're gonna need new countries. Now, another thing that happens is, of course, being exposed to different cultures. In Netherlands, if something doesn't work the first time, so you try to make it work. Now, it has its good and bad things, because one of the things that I remember the people at the shelter were dealing with was people are expected to be self-sustaining, and everything was designed to make it literally impossible. The When you're told where the shelter is, you're told by car time rather than by the time it would take to walk there, and you're expected to walk in the snow for 2 hours to a place that's not necessarily safe. A lot of people freeze in the street. In fact, I remember when I was hiding in the central station in a bathroom, and I had the euro or half, I don't remember how much it cost, or the half euro to stay in there. It was the person that was cleaning the place. He was a big person living in Netherlands, and he said, "Oh, here, okay," and and I have the lady as my in my family's Dutch, so um, he said he tells me here, one has to take care of themselves. Nobody helps you. Nobody, and it was such a fascinating conversation because he's basically a person that immigrated to Netherlands, and I was basically a person who was supposed to be returning home, and he's telling me here is not, it's not possible to live. And I know that from Israel as well. When people make aliyah, then people tell them this is crazy. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if when Palestinians want to leave here, the Israelis would tell them, "You are crazy. It is crazy. Nobody can. The living cost." um, and as I was thinking, and as I'm, cleaning, it was this thing that we cook on, which is how do you call it? It's the thing that you warm. Call it plata in Hebrew. It's but not for the Saturday one. It's just this thing that people just warm this to cook. It's kind of like a, it's kind of like a mobile stove. So, so I was cleaning that from the oil, and as this thinking was like, where is a place for me to live? The understanding was that I need my own place. It's not by someone. It's not by someone also in rent. And it's not because I have a problem with rent or with this or with that. It's like, hey, if I can afford that, it's not a problem. Um, but it is that I have my own identity, my own costumes, my own way of doing things. That definitely there are certain things that can be improved upon and so on and so forth, but it will be improved upon towards my way rather than towards any type of perception of how things should be, whether it's cultural, whether it's the culture of the people that, let's say, own the estate and so on and so forth. And and that's something that Googleplex people are dealing with, is to design their life in their own way. And it's not like they don't need help, which is the wound, which is Chiron in Aries. Because with Chiron in Aries, maybe I could just assemble some rocks in mud and build me a place, and okay, but if that thing would, I would need contact with people. It would need to be in a place where I'm safe. It would need to be something that doesn't violate a shit ton of rules. um and and that became something that we can't ignore when we try to think big and solve big problems, is the individual. When I was in between houses, to be very honest, it was the most surprising thing for me that it was so difficult because I was the kind of, my thinking wasn't the kind of thinking of, how should I say that? I was thinking in the sense that to begin with, I would never think to leave, but the fact that there was a crisis where I had to leave. And when I was thinking about where to stay, then at first I was like, well, a bed in a hostel is fine. Like I wasn't understanding what does it make for me to have a home that is sustainable for me, and I was beginning with below the minimum. Yeah, I basically for 1 month I paid um, for a bed in a hostel just to look for housing there, and then I said, wait a second, I need to think about whether I what do I do with my business and so on and so forth. Um, and a bed in a hostel, and fine, I was paying the rent that what if the place I left, the entire place was costing what I paid for one bed in a hostel, but basically I was paying for the time to not get into these type of searches without understanding what is the purpose of looking for all these details and all these decision making. And from that point, well, basically I had to flee there. I began to go through a journey of assessing what do I actually need to make as a house. And now we have humanity going through that on a country level and on an individual level. Because this type of thought of, hey, you don't need more than that, or yeah, but at least they have that. No, what brings people, it's upside down from that, because before a person loses their home, there are many things that they think that they don't need that they do need, and then they lose their home. Why do people that were invested in sexual boundary violation of any kind, oil, weapon industry, medical industry, found that they lost their homes? You think a lot of the people that lost not their houses but their RVs weren't invested in oil? And I'm not saying that, oh my God, you invest in oil, see what happens to you. No, I'm looking at the big picture with zero shame, zero blame, just what happens and what are the points of interference to change that. People go homeless because society needs to change. And it's both their home society and the society that they are immigrants, refugees, or even returning from exile to. Whether it's Aliyah, whether it's people coming from the diaspora into back to North Africa or back to Africa in general, or whether it's going back to Europe. Okay, if a person escapes sexual violence and they say, okay, I'm going to go back home, I'm going to go back to my home country, and their home country is one of their cultural, is beyond investments, is culture, has to do with something that is ritual abuse, torture, to mind control, And then it becomes trafficking under the guise of sex work. When the Me Too came about, there were 2 years I was not in contact with my own mom because I couldn't afford the time it takes her to understand the connection between what her daughter is going through to her weird responses. And she hears that Palestine song again. um, to what between what her mother is going through to the natural responses, whether it's to the news or so I had to take 2 years off because this is where the collision, the awareness, and of course those are things. It's not that the people don't have traumas and medical issues because of that. Okay. And normally people by this age basically have learned to treat themselves in spite of what the doctors told them. And then something that they weren't even aware of comes up to the forefront to be addressed when it happens to children. It's very challenging. Even the methods of open dialogue that are quite remediating when we talk about generations, probably the children and the grandchildren are dealing with the result of something that was a necessity back then, but it's time to change because it has implications by now. And those are not things that we can predict 3 generations forward. Nah, not now. So people stick to the tradition, but when Pluto is in Capricorn and Aquarius, we're basically rejuvenating what is set in stone. And this is why it's affecting also the teeth, the nervous system, and so on. Yes, wait, I need